Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. Welcome back. It's me and my co-host, JC.
Hey, Wendy.
Hi.
How are you?
Dude.
Yeah.
I am so thrilled by our guest today, Lindsay Karnick. I was looking at her website. I'm telling you, great website, Lindsay. And I read in there in your bio that you fell in love with this type of work when you were running a therapeutic unit for incarcerated young men who were also gang members in a maximum security youth prison. Like, mind blown. Tell us a little bit about that and how it affected you.
Yes, it was an amazing experience, not to be probably replicated ever, I'm sure. And I think there are a couple things that make an experience like that truly tremendous. And one is that you recognize that we all want to be heard, and that is the most basic human desire that spans no matter how different you think your life looks on paper from the next person's. We have some pretty common aspirations and things that make us tick. And one is the desire to be heard and to be understood. And one of my takeaways from that experience is that it is equally painful, universally painful for people to be misunderstood.
Yeah. Talking about mental health resources and how difficult or easy, depending on what side you look at it, is to implement it in your organization. Go ahead, JC.
Implementing mental health resources, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Companies that invest in mental health services, they report a 4-to-1 return on investment due to increased productivity, reduced absenteeism, and improved employee retention. Practical steps for HR leaders include selecting the right providers and promoting these services through targeted communication strategies. Back to you.
4-to-1 return on investment. Lindsay, oh my goodness, my mind is blown. Let's talk about, for our listeners, how the heck they can integrate therapy services in their organizations, whether they're small businesses, big businesses, regardless of where they're at, where they're located.
Yes, those numbers surprise me not at all. And I think people are pretty aware that that's the case. And maybe a lot of smaller companies or small business owners struggle to imagine what that might look like on a smaller scale. And I think one of the most important things is not can your business afford literally or metaphorically to hire an EAP service or that kind of thing. What was the recent show, Billions, where they have an in-house therapist, I think, for the whole organization on the 100th floor or something. Most companies are not that, but it can be as simple as supporting your folks and letting them know that if they need that service, you'll support them in accessing it, or letting them know that, hey, you know what you have handy? You have a list of providers who are in network for these insurance companies that maybe your company is associated with. And if your organization doesn't provide sponsored healthcare or health insurance, and everybody's got their own health insurance, you can make it known and make it very clear that you support people who need to take some time and find someone. You can say, hey, we don't support that service in-house, but we are supportive of you accessing that service. Let there be no mistake. So whatever we can do to help you with that. And there are certainly free resources in every community that become clearinghouses for local mental health folks. And, certainly with telehealth, folks have a much broader selection. It doesn't have to be local. And so if you're a small business that is not quite at the scale where you're going to have some sort of in-house service or even a contracted service like EAP, I'd really encourage you to still be proactive and understand that every bit that you do to make it clear to your folks that you're supporting that initiative and them investing in that for themselves is something that you're on board with. There's so many ways to do that don't have anything to do with, do you have to have an EAP program?
Yeah, and it's even to even take that another step further, you don't have to have an EAP program, an employee assistance program. You don't even have to have benefits, meaning health insurance benefits. You just have to do some research about your local area or remote, like you said, and provide that information to people. Because if somebody has never been involved, never been to therapy at all, there might be a stigma involved there too. They might be ashamed to ask. And so the one thing I could say, Lindsay, that I love the youngest generations right now, because they don't, it doesn't bother them one bit to say, yep, I have a counselor, here's my information. They're proud of it. They're not ashamed of it. Older generations were ashamed of it. And thankfully, society's changing. And I'm actually thrilled since the pandemic, and it was before the pandemic too, but how you just mentioned about remote, there's so many more remote options of therapy.
Yes, and there's some really wonderful directories that are open access and free. There's one called ZenCare that I'm a big fan of, Therapy Den, psychologytoday.com, besttherapist.com. There's so many I cannot possibly bring up front of mind at the moment. But these, are wonderful resources. And don't underestimate, if you're a small business owner, or, you're in a management position in a company that's just not scaled up, again, to have those in-house or contracted services, don't underestimate the power of handing all of your folks a list that just says, hey, if you're thinking you might like some support, we want to support you in that. And here are the web addresses for 5 directories where you can read about people, and then you can call and interview them and see if that's somebody you might like to talk to. I think, again, just by messaging an openness and a supportiveness to the concept, and providing people even with a basic starting point, you're creating a certain sensibility, and you're role modeling a kind of acceptance and supportiveness that cannot be underestimated.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving those names of those sites. And folks, just go onto the internet and search therapy or counseling directory, and then that will open that up for you. And especially for the people that don't have insurance or don't have the insurance that's going to cover therapy, it's super important to have this maybe connected to your intranet as well, and your website, wherever you have your benefits posted too. So thanks everybody for listening to episode 3 of our 5-part series on supporting employee well-being, why therapy benefits matter. And our next episode, episode 4, we're going to be covering overcoming stigma and encouraging employees to use these therapy resources. So we'll talk a little bit more about what we just started discussing. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.